Before there was law, before there was justice, before the sky had a voice, there was fear. Fear ruled the universe like a clenched fist. The Titans reigned then, vast and ancient, their power drawn from stone, sea, and time itself. At their head stood Cronus, devourer of his own children, lord of inevitability. He ruled not with wisdom, but with terror born of prophecy. For Cronus had heard the whisper that all tyrants dread, that one day his own blood would rise against him. So he swallowed his heirs. One by one, they vanished into darkness. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. Each newborn god silenced before their first breath could echo across the world. Their mother Rhea screamed without sound as her children were erased. But fate is not so easily consumed, and neither is the storm. Rhea wandered the earth in secret, heavy with her sixth child. Mountains groaned beneath her steps. Rivers fell quiet as she passed. Gaia herself, the deep-rooted earth, spoke softly to her, urging patience and courage. This child, Gaia said, would not be lost. When the hour came, Rhea fled to Crete, where cliffs rose like watchful guardians and caves breathed cool shadows. There, far from Cronus's throne, she gave birth. The child did not cry. Instead, thunder rolled. Lightning flickered faintly across the cave walls, as if the sky itself had bent low to witness the moment. Rhea named him Zeus, a name that tasted of daylight and open air. But joy was brief. Cronus would soon come. Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and carried it to her husband. Cronus, blind with fear and certainty, swallowed it whole. The universe trembled, but nothing changed. Zeus lived. Hidden among nymphs, guarded by warriors who clashed shields to mask his cries, Zeus grew in secret. He drank the milk of the divine goat Amalthea, and honey sweetened his breath. Every day the sky above Crete grew louder, restless, as if waiting. Zeus did not grow like other gods. Where others learned patience, he learned listening. He listened to wind curling through pine trees. He listened to waves breaking against rock. He listened to the murmurs of mortals below, fragile creatures who prayed to gods they barely understood. And slowly, something formed within him, not just power, but judgment. He learned of his siblings, lost inside Cronus. He learned of tyranny disguised as order. He learned that fear cannot hold forever. When Zeus came of age, Gaia appeared to him in dream and soil alike. She did not command him. She reminded him. "You are not vengeance," she said. "You are balance." Zeus returned to Cronus not with thunder, but with cunning. Disguised, patient, he offered his father a drink mixed with divine bitterness. Cronus drank, and the past returned. The swallowed gods emerged, whole and furious, blinking at a world they had never known. The air cracked with possibility. The age of Titans had been challenged. War followed, not a war of moments, but of years. Mountains were hurled like insults, seas boiled. The sky itself split as Titans and younger gods clashed. Zeus freed the Cyclopes from Tartarus, ancient beings wronged by Cronus's fear. In gratitude, they forged weapons worthy of fate. For Zeus, they gave lightning. Not merely fire from the sky, but authority made visible. When Zeus hurled his first thunderbolt, the world learned a new sound, the sound of decision. The war ended not with mercy, but with conclusion. Cronus fell, his reign sealed beneath the earth he once commanded. The Titans were bound, their age closed like a heavy door. Zeus stood among his siblings, breath steady, eyes lifted toward the open sky. There was no cheer, only silence. Then Zeus spoke, not as conqueror, but as anchor. The world would not be ruled by fear again. The cosmos would be divided, not hoarded. Poseidon would take the seas, Hades the unseen depths, and Zeus would take the sky, the space between all things, the realm that watches everything. From Mount Olympus, the clouds gathered, no longer chaotic, but obedient. Thunder no longer screamed, it answered. The storm had found its voice. Thus began the reign of Zeus, not as a perfect god, nor a gentle one, but as the axis upon which gods and mortals would turn. His justice would be flawed. His passions would shape heroes and disasters alike. But order, once born, would never again vanish into silence. Zeus did not step into peace so much as he stepped into aftermath. Even when the last Titan roar faded into the depths, the world still quivered with the memory of old rule. Valleys were scorched where mountains had been flung. Forests leaned like tired soldiers. The sea carried a bruise-colored sheen in certain coves, as if it remembered heat and iron. Mortals, newer, softer beings, hid in caves and among reeds, watching the sky the way animals watch a hunter's shadow. Zeus watched them too. From the highest ridge of Olympus, he stood with his brothers and sisters, not yet arranged into anything like a court, not yet settled into titles that would stick. They looked like survivors, not rulers. Hestia's gaze drifted toward the nearest hearth smoke in a village below, as if she already belonged to the small, warm things. Demeter's hands clenched and unclenched, feeling the soil even from this height. Hera's expression was storm-still, calm that held lightning behind it. Poseidon looked down toward the sea with longing sharp as hunger. Hades said little, but the quiet around him seemed to deepen, as if shadows were listening. Zeus raised his chin and let the wind strike his face. The sky had always been there, but now it had a king who could be held accountable by the very air. He understood, in a way Cronus never did, that power is not only the ability to end an argument. Power is the responsibility to prevent every argument from becoming a war. So he began with the simplest, hardest thing. He began with rules, not the kind carved into stone by fear, but the kind spoken aloud and witnessed by gods who would remember. He called them to the summit, his siblings, the elder deities who had remained apart from the war, the river gods and sea nymphs, the bright ones who carried dawn, and the quiet ones who carried night. Even the winds arrived, invisible but present, circling like curious hawks. Olympus filled with divinity the way a hall fills with candlelight, glow upon glow, until the air itself felt alive. Zeus spoke to them like a man learning how to be a king. He did not pretend he had always known. He told them the world was too raw for another age of hunger. He told them that if the new gods wished to be more than a second version of the Titans, they needed a center, something steadier than any single temper. He offered that center, but he did not demand worship the way Cronus demanded obedience. Instead, he demanded agreement. A line was drawn, not on earth, but in intention. The underworld would have its boundaries, the sea its depths, the sky its expanse. Rivers would keep their courses. Seasons would return in rhythm. Oaths would mean something. And because gods are gods, and pride is older than fire, arguments rose instantly. Poseidon's voice rolled like surf against cliffs. The sea touches every shore. The sea holds the world's weight. Why should the sky sit above it like a crown? Hades' reply was softer and somehow colder. Because the dead do not argue. They obey without needing thunder. Hera's gaze fixed on Zeus. And what of those who are neither sea nor shadow? What of the hearth and the field, the vow and the home? Do you plan to divide everything and leave the rest to fend for itself? Zeus felt the pull of it. His siblings, each a force, each a possible rival. The easy path would have been to command silence. He could have snapped the air into submission with a thought. Lightning always made a point quickly. Instead, Zeus breathed in and let the moment stretch. Then he did something that surprised them. He listened. He let Poseidon speak until his anger became clarity. He let Hades speak until his quiet became truth. He let Hera speak until her sharpness revealed its root. Not jealousy, not yet, but principle. She wanted the world to be more than territories and trophies. She wanted the world to have dignity. When the noise finally began to tire itself out, Zeus lifted one hand, not as a threat, but as a signal. Above them, clouds gathered without being summoned, drawn by the shape of his will. Thunder did not break. It waited. "I will not be Cronus," Zeus said. His voice was not loud, but it traveled. "I will not swallow the future because I fear it. I will not chain you because I cannot trust you. But I will ask this: will you build with me, or will you keep tearing at one another until the world collapses under our feet?" It was the first time many of them heard a god speak as if the world mattered more than his pride. One by one, the others answered, not with kneeling, but with presence. That was enough. Zeus sealed their agreement in the oldest way gods knew, by oath. A river like a black ribbon wound through the unseen places of the world. Its water carried a weight that made even immortals careful. When Zeus invoked that river, it was not a flourish. It was a warning. Speak falsely, and you would not be punished like a mortal. You would be undone in a way only gods can be undone, emptied, silenced, set aside by your own immortality. Even Poseidon's grin faded at that. Even Hera's eyes narrowed with a new respect. With oaths spoken, Olympus began to change. It was not built like a mortal palace. No one hauled stones in lines, no one measured pillars with string. The gods shaped the mountain with thought and desire. Hestia coaxed warmth into the cold halls. Demeter coaxed vines to crawl over terraces. Hera brought symmetry and purpose, insisting that power without order was just noise. Poseidon, in a rare generous mood, carved fountains that tasted of deep sea salt and mountain snow at once. Hades contributed almost nothing visible, yet the mountain suddenly felt anchored, as if it had roots into the world's deep places. Zeus watched it rise around him. A home for gods, yes, but also a symbol. A place from which the universe could be governed without constant violence. Still, a throne is not truly a throne until others agree it is one. Zeus knew he needed more than a mountain. He needed legitimacy, not only in the eyes of gods, but in the eyes of the world. That legitimacy, Gaia whispered, came not from conquest, but from balance, especially balance between power and wisdom. And so Zeus turned his attention to the older currents of divinity, the ones that did not roar or rise like waves, but flowed. He found Metis in the place where cleverness lives, near springs that never ran dry, among reeds that whispered even when the wind was still. Metis was not a goddess who demanded attention. She had the kind of presence that made you realize you were already paying attention. She spoke to Zeus as if he were not a king, but a young storm trying to learn its direction. "You defeated your father," she said, "but you did not defeat what made him." Zeus frowned. Fear. Metis tilted her head. Hunger. The belief that if you do not control everything, you will lose everything. Zeus felt the truth of it bite. The war had ended, but the old instinct remained. Tighten your grip, strike first, keep everyone guessing. The same instinct that made Cronus swallow his children could easily make Zeus crush anyone who looked like a threat. Metis moved closer, not with seduction, but with clarity. She offered him counsel. She offered him a way to be strong without being brittle. For a time, Zeus was not only thunder, he became a student. He learned that justice is not the same as victory. He learned that mercy is not weakness. He learned that a ruler who cannot be questioned will eventually be overthrown by the first honest question. Zeus, who had always believed the sky belonged to him, began to understand something humbler. The sky belongs to everyone beneath it. That understanding did not soften him into gentleness. It sharpened him into purpose. When other gods arrived with disputes, river gods quarreling over boundaries, nymphs crying that hunters had turned sacred groves into sport, mortals begging for rain or relief, Zeus began to judge not by whim, but by weight. He did not always choose correctly, but he began to choose consciously, which is a rare thing in gods. And that, perhaps, was why the prophecy returned. It did not come as a spoken warning from an oracle on a hill. It came as an old feeling in the bones of the cosmos. Gaia and Uranus, the deep earth and the high sky, the ancestors of so many powers, murmured of a pattern. A king is challenged by his son, and the world turns over like soil. Zeus knew the story. He had lived its newest chapter. The prophecy did not say a son would attempt to overthrow him. It said a son would succeed. The idea lodged in Zeus like a thorn. Metis, wise and bright, was with child. Zeus's mind, so newly trained toward balance, wavered. He wanted to be better than Cronus, but fear is not defeated by good intentions. Fear is defeated by choices made under pressure. He tried to reason with the prophecy as if it were an argument he could win. Perhaps it meant metaphor. Perhaps it meant a son of a son. Perhaps it meant the kind of overthrow that happens when a ruler becomes irrelevant rather than defeated. But the warning kept its shape. And one night, when the stars were sharp as spearheads and the wind tasted of coming frost, Zeus made a decision that would define him as much as any thunderbolt. He swallowed Metis, not in violence the way Cronus swallowed newborns, but in a terrifying kind of protection, an act he told himself was necessary. He told himself he was preventing war. He told himself he was keeping the cosmos from repeating its ugliest cycle. Metis did not scream in the way mortals scream. She looked at him, truly looked, and Zeus felt the sting of being seen. Then she was gone into him, not dead, but contained. The mountain itself seemed to hold its breath. For a while, Zeus acted as if nothing had happened. He held court. He settled quarrels. He threw storms over arrogant kings and gave clear skies to farmers who poured wine to the gods in gratitude. He spoke with Hera more often, drawn to her strength, her refusal to be impressed by thunder alone. Hera was not gentle. Hera was not easy. Hera did not flatter. She looked at Zeus the way a judge looks at a witness. It made him want her. Not just as a queen to decorate his reign, but as a counterweight. Someone who could stand beside him and tell him when he had become too much like the old tyrants. He approached her with offerings fit for a goddess, peacocks with tails like stained glass, gold that held sunlight, promises that felt like chains if spoken wrong. Hera watched all of it without blinking. "Do you want a wife?" she asked. "Or do you want a symbol?" Zeus, caught off guard, answered honestly, "I want a partner." Hera studied him, and in her silence, Zeus heard the truth. She did not trust him. Not yet. Trust, to Hera, was not a spark. It was architecture. So Zeus tried, truly tried, to build it. He invited her counsel and judgments. He asked her to shape Olympus's order. He let her disagree with him in public, which is the kind of permission that costs a king more than he expects. Slowly, Hera began to step nearer, not because Zeus dazzled her, but because Zeus made room for her to exist without being diminished. Their union did not happen like a romantic tale sung by bards. It happened like a treaty between powers that knew the stakes. When Hera finally accepted him, it was not surrender. It was selection. On the day of their marriage, the heavens cleared so thoroughly that even distant seas reflected the sky like polished shields. Nymphs braided flowers that had never bloomed before. Hestia's hearth fire burned steady and bright, a quiet blessing. Demeter scattered grain across the mountain's terraces so that abundance would always remember this day. Even Poseidon arrived without complaining, though he muttered that weddings made too much noise. Zeus looked at Hera beside him, regal, unbending, luminous with authority that did not require lightning, and he felt something unfamiliar. Not conquest, belonging. For a time, Olympus seemed to settle, but inside Zeus, Metis remained alive, and her wisdom did not sleep. It pressed outward, shaping his thoughts, sharpening his judgment, whispering strategies and cautions like a second mind. Zeus began to speak with a precision that startled even the other gods. He began to see through deceptions before they fully formed. He began to anticipate storms before the clouds gathered. Then came the pain. It started as a pressure behind his eyes, a pulse that matched thunder without release. It grew day by day, until Zeus could barely stand on the summit without gripping a pillar as if it were the only thing holding the world together. His temper flared, not from arrogance but from agony. Lightning cracked accidentally at his fingertips. The sky above Olympus growled even when the air was clear. Hera confronted him, sharp as ever. "You are hiding something," she said. Zeus wanted to deny it. He wanted to keep the shame locked behind his teeth. But the pain climbed higher, and truth has a way of forcing doors open. He told her, not every detail, not every fear, but enough. Hera's face did not soften. It hardened into something older than anger. Insult, not because Zeus had loved Metis once, but because Zeus had made a world-shaking decision without a word to the one who now stood beside him. "Is this your balance?" Hera asked. "Is this your justice?" Zeus could not answer because the pain made speech impossible. It reached a peak like a wave about to break. Zeus staggered out into the open air. The other gods gathered at a distance, uneasy. They had seen war. They had seen titans fall. But they had never seen Zeus himself look vulnerable. Hephaestus was not yet the famous smith of later songs, but there were hands on Olympus that knew craft and force. One stepped forward with a tool, an implement meant for splitting stone, not flesh. The gods hesitated. Zeus, sweating with divine fire, did not. He nodded. The blow struck. The sound was not gore. It was not horror. It was like a mountain cracking, like the world making room for something new. And from Zeus's head, with a burst of light as clean as dawn, emerged Athena. She rose full-grown, armored not in menace but in readiness. Her eyes held brightness without softness, intelligence without cruelty. She looked at the stunned assembly of gods, then at Zeus, and something like recognition crossed her face, an understanding that her birth was a paradox. She was both inheritance and defiance. The sky did not thunder in that moment. It rang. Athena stepped forward, planting her feet on Olympus as if she had always belonged there. When she spoke, her voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had listened to wisdom for a very long time. "Father," she said, and in that word, Zeus felt both pride and dread. Hera stared. Not at Athena's armor, not at the spectacle of it, but at what Athena represented. A child born without Hera's role in it, a symbol of Zeus's ability to remake even motherhood into something he controlled. The wound between Zeus and Hera did not open with a scream. It opened with silence. Hera turned away first, and the air around her felt suddenly colder, as if marriage itself had drawn back to watch what would happen next. Athena, unaware or unwilling to react to the tension, began immediately to do what she was born to do: stand beside power and refine it. She asked questions that made Zeus think. She suggested solutions that did not rely on punishment. She challenged Poseidon's pride without insulting his domain. She listened to Demeter's concerns about mortals starving when gods treated land like a chessboard. She spoke with Hades without flinching, acknowledging the underworld's necessity without romanticizing it. In her presence, Olympus became less like a battlefield camp and more like a council. And Zeus found himself changing again. Not becoming gentler, not becoming smaller, but becoming more layered. Still, the kingdom of the sky had enemies beyond titans. Some were ancient resentments that did not die easily. Some were wild forces that disliked any kind of order. Some were gods and spirits who had waited out the war and now tested the new reign the way wolves test a new leader's strength. Zeus learned quickly that peace does not mean quiet. Peace means responsibility that never sleeps. When mortals lied beneath the open sky, it was Zeus who heard their vows. When kings broke promises, it was Zeus who felt the insult to the very idea of oath. When the travelers were harmed on roads and rivers, Zeus sensed the world tilting toward lawlessness again. So Zeus began to send signs, not always lightning. Sometimes a sudden gust that knocked a crown from a head. Sometimes a dream that woke a tyrant sweating. Sometimes a flood that reminded a village that riverbanks are not owned, they're borrowed. And when gentler warnings failed, thunder returned. There were moments when Zeus stood alone above cloudline, listening to the world below, and wondered if he was truly different from Cronus, or simply more skilled at justifying himself. Medus's wisdom inside him did not let him rest easily. Athena's presence did not let him pretend he was always right. Hera's distance did not let him believe marriage had solved the problem of power. Zeus carried all of it like a sky carries weather, beauty and danger, clarity and storm. One evening, as the sun sank and the first stars appeared, Zeus sat on Olympus's highest terrace. The wind was gentle, almost human in its touch. Athena stood nearby, looking outward as if she were measuring the world's shape. "Do you fear me?" Zeus asked her suddenly. Athena turned her gaze to him. "Fear is a tool," she said. "You can use it, or it can use you." Zeus nodded slowly. "And prophecy?" Athena's expression did not change. "Prophecy is a river. You can dam it, you can redirect it, but you will never make water forget how to move." Zeus looked out at the world again. Smoke rose from hearths. Waves glittered. The earth darkened into night. Mortals laughed somewhere far below, unaware that gods weighed their lives like coins. Zeus felt, in that moment, the true weight of his reign. Not the thunderbolt, not the throne, the impossible task of being the sky, open enough to hold everything, strong enough not to collapse, and wise enough not to crush what lived beneath it. The sky learned restlessness, not the wild unrest of war, but the quieter tension that comes when order settles and begins to test its own limits. Olympus stood whole now, its terraces bright with marble and cloudlight, its halls alive with voices that carried far beyond stone. The gods had places, titles, rituals. Mortals had seasons again. Oaths traveled cleanly through the air, and yet the sky did not sleep. Zeus felt it most at night, when the wind slowed and even thunder hesitated. He would stand alone at the edge of Olympus, looking down at a world that now depended on his restraint as much as his strength. Power no longer rushed through him like a battle cry. It pooled. It waited. That waiting bred desire. Zeus had learned to rule storms, but ruling himself proved harder. Hera watched him closely. As queen, Hera held Olympus together with something sharper than force. She kept rituals exact, honors distributed, disputes framed in language that prevented chaos from slipping through the cracks. The gods respected her not because she was Zeus's wife, but because she understood the architecture of authority. Where Zeus was sky, Hera was law-given shape. And yet, beneath that discipline, she waited for betrayal the way sailors wait for a squall. Zeus did not set out to wound her. That was the truth that made everything worse. He was drawn outward by motion itself, by nymphs who laughed like running water, by mortal queens whose courage burned briefly and brightly, by the simple intoxication of being wanted without judgment. The sky touches everything, and Zeus convinced himself that contact did not always mean commitment. Each time he crossed that line, he told himself it was separate from his throne, separate from his marriage, separate from the careful balance he was building. Hera did not see it that way. When rumors reached Olympus, when whispers climbed mountains faster than messengers, Hera did not rage immediately. Rage was too simple. Instead, she investigated. She followed the trail of favors, sudden blessings, unlikely survivals. She learned the pattern of Zeus's silences. Her anger, when it came, was deliberate. Not lightning, but consequence. The first to feel it were not Zeus's lovers, but those who thought they could benefit from Zeus's attention without cost. A nymph found her stream diverted. A king found his city plagued with unrest that no prayer to Zeus could fix. Hera did not strike blindly. She corrected imbalances in ways that made examples. Zeus knew. He felt each correction like a tug on the fabric of the sky. They argued often now, not with shouting but with precision. Hera accused him not of infidelity, but of carelessness, of undermining the very order he claimed to protect. "You punish mortals for broken oaths," she said once, her voice cool as cut stone. and yet you teach them that vows mean nothing when power is bored." Zeus had no thunder for that. Athena stood between them more than once, not physically, but intellectually. Born from Zeus's head, Athena understood him too well to flatter him. She challenged Zeus the way Hera confronted him, but without heat. Athena asked questions that forced him to examine motives rather than outcomes. "What does the sky owe the earth?" she asked him after one particularly bitter dispute. Zeus answered without thinking. "Rain, light, protection, and restraint," Athena pressed. Zeus said nothing. The tension on Olympus began to ripple outward. Gods took sides quietly. Some excused Zeus as inevitable, arguing that desire was simply another weather pattern of the sky. Others sided with Hera, believing that if even the king of gods could not govern himself, then the word order meant nothing at all. Mortals felt it first in their dreams. Storms came suddenly, then vanished without rain. Crops thrived one year and failed the next without clear cause. Kings prayed harder. Oracles spoke more cautiously. The world sensed instability not because Zeus had grown weak, but because he had grown divided. In the depths of the earth, Gaia stirred. She had supported Zeus against Cronus, but she had not done so to replace one imbalance with another. She felt Hera's fury, Zeus's unrest, Athena's constant vigilance. She felt the sky leaning too heavily on the world below. And so, she acted. From her deepest places, she shaped a response, not born of hatred, but of correction. A force meant to test whether Zeus's rule was truly stronger than the fear that had ruled before. The earth cracked. From its wound rose Typhon, vast and unfinished, a storm given flesh. His voice was wind tearing through caverns, his limbs twisted like living mountains. Fire and poison breathed together from his many mouths. Typhon was not subtle. He was not clever. He was pressure. When Typhon rose, Olympus shook. Gods scattered, rivers reversed. The sky darkened not with clouds, but with dread. Zeus felt the challenge instantly, not to his throne, but to the principle of order itself. This was not a rival king. This was chaos demanding to be acknowledged. Hera watched Zeus carefully as the first tremors reached Olympus. "Do not answer this as you answered Cronus," she warned. "Do not mistake domination for resolution." Zeus nodded once. He understood. When he descended to face Typhon, he did not do so in fury. He did not roar his name across the sky. He approached as the sky itself, vast, unavoidable, patient. Typhon struck first. The clash was unlike the Titan War. There were no armies, no alliances, just force against force. Typhon's coils crushed valleys. Zeus's lightning split peaks. The air screamed as fire met wind again and again. Mortals fled or knelt or hid, unsure whether this battle was punishment or proof that gods were as fragile as the world they ruled. At one moment, Typhon's strength overwhelmed Zeus. Poison burned his limbs. The sky faltered. For the first time since Cronus fell, the world felt the possibility of a god's defeat. And in that moment, Zeus understood something final and terrifying. If he ruled only by power, he would always be challenged by something larger, uglier, more destructive. So Zeus changed. He stopped trying to overpower Typhon. Instead, he contained him, calling on the full breadth of the sky, not just thunder, but pressure, gravity, weight. Zeus pressed Typhon downward, not into oblivion, but into confinement. Mountain upon mountain fell, not hurled, but placed. The earth sealed itself over the chaos it had birthed. When the last echo faded, Typhon was buried, not destroyed. The world exhaled. Olympus stood. Zeus returned changed, not triumphant, measured. Hera met him without accusation. Athena met him without praise. Neither was needed. From that day forward, Zeus ruled storms more carefully. He punished less impulsively. He listened longer. He understood that being king of the gods did not mean being the loudest force in the universe. It meant being the one who decided when force ended. The sky learned discipline, and for a time, that was enough. The age of open war was over, but the age of consequence had only begun. After Typhon was sealed beneath the weight of the world, Olympus did not celebrate. There were no songs, no feasts that spilled wine like careless laughter. The gods understood what that battle had revealed. Chaos had not been destroyed. It had been restrained, and restraint, unlike victory, requires constant attention. Zeus felt that truth settle into him like a second spine. The sky grew quieter, but it did not grow tame. Storms still came, yet they arrived with purpose. Rain for fields that cracked with thirst, wind for ships that dared the horizon, lightning only when arrogance reached too high. Mortals began to understand that the sky was not merely dangerous. It was watching, and watching changes everything. From Olympus, Zeus now ruled less as a warrior and more as a judge. Petitioners came in numbers that surprised even the gods. River spirits complained of diverted courses. Nymphs pleaded for sacred groves stripped bare. Kings swore innocence with mouths that tasted of lies. Zeus listened, not because he enjoyed it, but because ignoring them would have been easier, and therefore wrong. At his side more often stood Athena. She did not speak first. She observed. When she did offer counsel, it was sharp and spare, cutting away excuses until only truth remained. Zeus learned to wait for her silence as much as her words. Justice, Athena told him once, is not the absence of mercy. It is the refusal to let mercy become favoritism. Zeus nodded, and the sky above Olympus cleared as if it approved. Hera, too, had changed. Her anger had not vanished. It had evolved. She no longer pursued every wound Zeus caused with personal vengeance. Instead, she reshaped her power toward institutions, marriage, oaths, lineage. Where Zeus governed the visible sky, Hera governed the invisible bonds that held society together. Mortals who broke vows found themselves isolated. Alliances rotted. Houses fell not to lightning, but to mistrust. Some gods whispered that Hera had become cruel. Zeus knew better. She had become precise. Their marriage remained strained, but it endured, not because it was peaceful, but because it was honest in its friction. They argued less about desire and more about consequence. Zeus learned that not every union needed to be pursued. Hera learned, slowly, that Zeus's authority no longer rested on appetite alone. Olympus, under their uneasy balance, stabilized. And from stability came expansion. Zeus's children multiplied, not all born to Hera, not all welcomed easily. Each carried a fragment of him, not just thunder, but judgment, curiosity, contradiction. Apollo arrived like clarity made flesh. Bright, exacting, intolerant of disorder, Apollo inherited Zeus's authority without his patience. He loved rules when they favored him and despised ambiguity. Where Zeus listened, Apollo declared. He took to prophecy not as warning, but as proof that the world should conform to patterns he understood. Zeus watched him carefully. Power, he had learned, does not need encouragement. It needs guidance. Artemis followed, quieter, sharper at the edges. Where Apollo burned toward the center of attention, Artemis slipped sideways into forests and moonlight. She carried Zeus's independence without his need for command. She did not rule. She protected. Women in danger felt her presence like a hand on the shoulder. Wild things trusted her instinctively. Zeus felt pride there, uncomplicated and rare. Hermes came last among the younger Olympians, laughing where others measured. Born of speed and wit, Hermes moved between worlds the way thought moves between ideas. He spoke for Zeus not with thunder, but with charm and timing. Where Zeus's presence might crush, Hermes slipped through cracks, delivering warnings that sounded like jokes and truths disguised as favors. Zeus realized, watching Hermes vanish into a horizon of clouds, that rule is not only about issuing commands, It is about translation. The sky must be understood to be obeyed. As his children took their places, Zeus felt the prophecy stir again, not with threat, but with inevitability. The future was no longer a single blade aimed at his throne. It was a branching path, filled with successors who would not overthrow him, but outgrow parts of him. This, he began to understand, was the true meaning of the warning. A king is not undone only by force. He is undone by irrelevance. So Zeus adapted. He stopped trying to be present everywhere. He delegated, not out of weakness but trust. He allowed Athena to judge wars before they began. He allowed Apollo's oracles to speak, even when their clarity made him uncomfortable. He allowed Artemis to refuse Olympus entirely, honoring her distance rather than dragging her into courtly gravity. Most difficult of all, he allowed Hera to stand apart from him, not behind, beside, but distinct. When mortals prayed to Hera for protection of marriage, Zeus did not interfere. When Hera punished betrayal, Zeus did not soften the blow. For the first time since the Titan War, their powers complemented instead of collided. The world felt the difference. Cities stabilized, laws hardened into custom. The line between divine punishment and mortal consequence sharpened. Humans began to believe not only that gods existed, but that their actions mattered. And that belief is dangerous, because belief invites challenge. One king after another tested Zeus, not with armies, but with cleverness. They bent oaths. They blamed fate. They invoked God selectively. Zeus answered each with patience until patience failed. When lightning struck those who crowned themselves above law, it was not wrath. It was correction. Still, Zeus felt the strain. Immortality does not protect against exhaustion. It only stretches it. There were nights when Zeus stood alone above the cloud line, thunder locked behind his ribs, wondering whether the sky could ever truly rest. Athena sometimes joined him, silent company against the stars. "You could loosen your grip," she said once. "Let the world stumble. And if it falls," Zeus asked, "then you decide whether falling teaches more than holding." Zeus considered that longer than he would admit. The sky does not release easily. Yet change continued, indifferent to his hesitation. Mortals grew bolder. Heroes rose, some bearing Zeus's blood, others merely borrowing his favor. Each carried the risk of greatness curdling into arrogance. Zeus intervened sparingly now, aware that too much guidance breeds dependency. When he did intervene, the consequences echoed. Not all stories ended well. Zeus accepted that. He had learned, across wars and marriages and prophecies, that perfection was never the goal. Stability was, balance was, and balance is always temporary. As the age turned, Zeus felt something settle at last, not peace, but readiness. The sky above Olympus deepened, vast and unbroken. Clouds moved with intention. Thunder slept, but lightly. Zeus remained king, not because no one challenged him, but because when the world shifted, he shifted with it. The sky learned endurance, not the stubborn endurance of stone or iron, but the living kind. The kind that bends, reforms, and remains. Ages passed beneath Zeus's gaze, not counted in years but in patterns. Cities rose where forests once breathed. Kingdoms hardened, cracked, and vanished. New names were spoken where old prayers had faded into dust. Through it all, Zeus remained. Not unchanged, but unbroken. He no longer stood at Olympus each dawn to assert his presence. The world knew the sky without reminders. Thunder was enough. Silence was often more than enough. Zeus had learned that authority, once established, does not need constant display. It needs consistency. Mortals tested that consistency endlessly. They asked why lightning struck one tyrant and spared another. They asked why floods came without warning, why prayers went unanswered, why heroes fell young and villains grew old. Zeus heard every question. He did not answer all of them. Some truths, he had learned, only exist when unanswered. From Olympus, the gods lived fuller lives now, complex, tangled, human in ways Zeus both recognized and regretted. Athena walked among cities, teaching strategy and restraint, shaping minds rather than armies. Apollo's oracles reshaped nations with a single phrase, their clarity both a gift and a curse. Artemis remained distant, but her presence was felt wherever wilderness still resisted walls. Hera ruled her domain with unwavering authority. She never forgave Zeus in the way mortals forgive, but forgiveness was not her goal. Stability was. Their marriage had become something rare among gods, not passion, not illusion, but function. Together they represented the two pillars of order, power and continuity. The sky could command, the vow could bind. And Zeus respected her for that more than he ever had in the beginning. The gods' disputes no longer escalated into threats of war. They had learned, under Zeus's long reign, that defiance did not mean rebellion. It meant argument, negotiation, consequence. Olympus had become not just a palace, but a system. That, Zeus knew, was his greatest creation. Not thunder, not victory, structure. Still, even systems face decay. As generations of mortals passed, belief shifted. Some prayed out of fear, some prayed out of habit. Some stopped praying altogether, trusting laws and steel instead of sky and omen. Zeus felt those changes like pressure in the atmosphere. The world was growing confident without him. At first, that stung. Then, slowly, it reassured him. This was what he had fought for. Not worship without thought, but a world that could stand long enough to forget how fragile it once was. Heroes still bore his blood. Their stories cut across time like lightning scars, brief, brilliant, destructive. Zeus watched them carefully, intervening less with each age. He understood now that guiding fate too tightly strangled it. When heroes fell, he did not always lift them. When monsters rose, he did not always strike them down. Balance demanded restraint, even when strength was absolute. One night, long after the age of Titans had passed into myth, Zeus stood again at the edge of Olympus. The sky stretched endlessly before him, layered with stars that no longer needed his name to shine. Athena stood nearby, as she often did, her presence steady. "The world no longer fears you as it once did," she said. Zeus smiled faintly. "Nor should it." "And when they no longer remember you?" she asked. Zeus did not answer immediately. He listened, to the wind, to the distant sea, to the murmur of human lives unfolding without divine permission. At last, he spoke. "Then the sky will still be there." Athena nodded. She understood. Zeus had finally reached the far side of prophecy. He had not been overthrown by a son. He had been transformed by succession. His children carried fragments of his authority. His laws lived on in custom. His thunder echoed in stories told long after storms had passed. Zeus no longer needed to dominate the world to rule it. He had become something rarer than a conqueror. He had become continuity. When Zeus finally returned to Olympus that night, clouds closed gently behind him. The sky remained open, vast, and watchful, not as a weapon, but as a promise. As long as the heavens stood above the earth, there would be order enough to challenge chaos. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, not in anger, not in warning, but in remembrance.